How's it going? How's it going, everyone? Elier Gonzalez here again. In today's video, we're gonna take a look now at the React Typescript, specifically the typings, refactorings. How can we start to use now reducers with types? How can we start to see the most common use case for types? And after all, the TLDR of this course is to see how can we actually, by looking at the code hints from the Visual Studio Code or your terminal editor and understand and do some code introspection, a lot of the time that's the quickest way to find your path forward. So the TypeScript now is a more strict way of how you can now tell to this component receive the proper shape of the data. And if you for some reason receive that, for some reason you receive something different at compilation time, at build time, you can now, so TypeScript will complain about it. So the reason of looking at that is because as your application grows in complexity, it is a lot of the time important to understand how your data flow goes through and what is the shape of this as a way to now make more, to build more robust applications here. Okay, at least in theory, at least applications that can quickly scale. So for example, here with thanks to Axel Rossmeyer, which it make a quick introduction of tackling TypeScript, the philosophical aspect of TypeScript, as well as a more pragmatic aspect of that, which is this is I really love about this. When we started to describe is why TypeScript and the benefit of TypeScript is because, especially if you come from language like Java that are strongly typed, which means that anytime you're gonna define a variable, you need to indicate to the language, hey, this is the type or the shape of this data, right? And by doing that, you a lot of the time prevent some common errors at runtimes. So, which is one of the value proposition of TypeScript. Hey, you're gonna receive all of this error at build time, which is less problematic. So you're not gonna receive any call at 2 a.m. one random Saturday because something went wrong and something crashed your app. All right, and also you're gonna now have a more self-documented code, which is indicating to all of the developers about how your code should use, and that's great for large code bases when a lot of people are actually integrating a code to that. And a lot of the time you can now know the shape of the data in TypeScript in the context of Visual Studio Code. This specific ID provides you this auto-completion features thanks to the language server, which is now a lightweight server that is run on Visual Studio Code. When it detects is the TypeScript files, and it provides you auto completions, the auto completions, type errors, and some code hints. But that is per file. If you want to know how is the structure, or if your entire TypeScript code base is well written, you use now is the TypeScript compiler. But the subtle difference here is to understand what's going on behind the scene, especially when you're using Visual Studio Code as a way to understand the benefits that now individuals like Steve Kinney actually mentioned, right? It's like from the React perspective, we can now know it's not only the shape of the data that we're receiving as props, or as context, or that we're receiving externally, But also, if we need to actually find out what is the type of this particular data, a lot of the time, by looking at the code hints that the Typescript provide, which is typing all of that things, even though typing error things, this is another way of how you can get it into that. You can now, by also doing some code introspection, a lot of the time it is much more easy and the quickest way to get the path for. So in today's video, because we're not going to talk about is philosophy on that kind of thing, we're just going to straightforward to what we really care about, which is looking at how can we now combine this or TypeScript reducers and actions with that, or the reducer with TypeScript, okay? And by briefly describe what is the essential of TypeScript, which is think of the two-level language. Develop this awareness of when you're going to write all of this TypeScript application that is two-level in your app, which is the static and the dynamic level. And the dynamic level is when you define all of the variables, and in the static level all the type here. So with this particular notion, and also how now arrays and objects plays a role in JavaScript, in the case of arrays as a tuple or as an array, okay, the subtle difference is that arrays are, all of their elements are the same, and it has an unknown or an arbitrary length of that, whereas tuples can have several different type of elements but with a fixed length. So this is something helpful, especially as you're going to develop application, you're going to develop logic here, you're now going to actually look at the lead code problem solutions as a way to come up with one of that, and also for objects, where now here is something especially useful, and which is something you're gonna use a lot of the time, that is in JavaScript, objects plays two roles. You got now the record, where you have now a arbitrary number of properties whose names are known in development, but each one of those properties have a different type. Whereas the dictionary, when you have now a fixed number of properties whose value are not known in development, but the types are the same. All of the types of that are the same. Why this is important, especially if you're going to create now more complex union type or combinations or intersections of objects. Again, the TLDR of this is because it can become quite a mess, keep it simple, right? Keep it simple, especially if you're going to work with genetics and type variables. Also look at how can we now write type annotations, type inference, which is something that you're gonna rely a lot of the time here, as well as the function types, where how is the function type works, how you can define out types in your functions, not only for your inputs but also for the outputs, as well as for the rest parameters, and how you can now define these union types as well as intersection types. So it can be either one or another, and the intersection is the way of how you can now extend functionalities or types in TypeScript using the ampersand. And I think this is something quite interesting to develop, especially, all right, when you combine that with the optional character, the default value, and the undefined, as well as the genetics. Because remember, after all, it's important to refresh this concept. The two level, levels in the language, the TypeScript and JavaScript, are now functions, or the dynamic aspect is when their values are generated using generally through functions, and their parameters are their parameters represent is any type of values. You represent that using is the parentheses. We're now in we're now in TypeScript. Genetics is a way of how you can now produce multiple types. They work at the static level, at the type level, and each parameters represent is the type of that. You can, as a way to determine that, you use now angle brackets. So this something, and when you now understand is the concept of union and intersection as a way to create now is types for that. All right. Remember that after all, in JavaScript, we generally generate is values, and in TypeScript, which is static level, we generate is type. This will be now the foundation of how we're going to now is defining is the TypeScript in our React components, useful for the prop types. Okay, how now we can use is React prop types, but actually that's deprecated. In fact, they just tell you to go with defining your own types or interface. The sole difference between types and interface is that types are used for React props and React states, whereas interface is that when you want to expose an API, when you want to expose a public API, you want the consumers to extend its functionality. Again, if a particular code base actually works with interface, go with interface. If they work with types, go with types. But I think this is the main misconception for that. So we also look at how can we define is type with our state. How can we use now define is types with children's when you want to pass now children's to these components, and also using with states. All right. And when it comes to now fetch data, how you want to define that, for example, in your use effect. Okay. So because by abstracting that, one particularly useful way to look at this is the idea of looking at the API is how you're going to send data using a form. Right now, we're not going to use a form because most of the time we use is React hook forms, a layer of abstraction of the React. But again, when you don't need to use this, you go with the form, and it's in your inside of your form when you need to dedicate is, or what you need to put is specific logic that you want to handle. For example, on submit or on change. So this is when we started to see how you can now provide is not only a setter function from an state, but also is a dispatch function, which is much more convenient when you now have a state that need to react to multiple inputs. So for example, a state that needs to actually know in which state the form is, what is the data that is now being updated, if you if the form is submitted, it is loading and that kind of thing. So that was quite interesting. Very, 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 very interesting. Because now with this dispatch set actions and the type of that action, okay, you can now also is find a way to patch that or to dispatch that, right? So a lot of time this is something that is quite convenient as a way to pass that. We also look at from the React performance, the reason of using useCallback and useMemo in contrast with the use reducers and dispatch. So we use reducer and dispatch. There's no such things like avoiding re-rendering components, or in other words, you don't need to actually take care if those values are reactive or not, because that reducer object that you create is plain and it won't change. So behind the scenes now React, what it's doing is bypassing now is the reducer function, which is a function that takes the initial state and an action to generate a new bit of states. That reducer will always be the same, so that reference will always be the same. So there is no need to actually is make some performance when our set and up when our setter function change, okay, or when the okay, exactly, when the when the setter function change, or exactly when the setter function change, or when you need to pass down that to distinct child components. So instead of using use callback and use Memo, you just use reducer and dispatch. So behind the scenes, you don't have now this. You don't need to do this performance optimization technique that you need to do with the use state, especially when you need to pass. When you need to define is an event handler function that update that state. That's what happened. So anytime this is for specific cases that it's going to stack up until it eventually it blows it up. So I mentioned this particular topic, the use callback and use memo with use state, as a way to use some optimization techniques when it comes to now share that state update across several event handlers, where any time now that the component is rendering, those functions or event handlers are different, because now JavaScript are recreate them, are reserving space in memory. So therefore, it of course going to now call that. So to prevent that, we use now callbacks for that, or memo as well. All right, it's like, hey, I don't want you to recompute this. I want you to now. I don't want you to recompute anytime the components renders, only when a particular state change. So what you're doing is just preventing to the component being called here or evaluating it, which is great. By using also is memo. And with reducer, there is no need to actually use callback and use memo for that. But there is a trade-off and there is a caveat when we use is the context API, and I think that's quite interesting. But in any case, because this is for the performance, and now we focus on Typescript, we look at how can we now write our reducers. Sorry. How can we write our reducers as a way we look at how can we write our reductors as a way to match them with different type of assumptions or for different actions that it need to perform. So that's quite interesting. That's very, 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 very interesting. Yep, it is. So we look at the creating action for color red.
All right, let's take a tour of this new app together and check it out. So
this is another app here. Not sure if we already got that open. Code solution. Application.js, packaging list, Wordman. I think it's this one, but this is Wordman. Okay. Because this is performance. Exactly. And this is Wordman. Oh, I already put this here. Oh, but Wordman now has his type. No, this is not. I get it. But in any case, there is a reason why it's being here. Colors, inspirational quotes, but I think it's colors. Okay. Great. Cool. And then you got it. That's exactly what we did. So right now you're not able to see what I'm doing because this is packaging list. I want is colors. That's right. Show them here. There you got it. Okay. So what we did here is just to create all of the different type of actions, and then create now an action reducer. The action, all the different action that it can be, okay, as well as our state. Define is the initial state here. Here's when we're starting to assigning is a value for that. Here's when we now is assigning is a type, and then here is how we now passing is the initial state, as well as the different actions here that we can have, and how now this will help us to complete this. And I really love about this. Update hex color, update RGB. This is something beautiful. Very, very beautiful. So let me actually update this. All right. All right. Who in the F told you? Okay. Paga lo que debes. Sí, sí, es contigo. All right. So, because of that, so now that we look at that, all right, which is something that we did. Actually, it was not that complicated. I think is... ¿Quién es?
Yo, mano.
¿Quién yo? Uy. Voy.
Oye, mano.
Está bien, ¿no?
Bueno, sálame la patria.
¿Cuánto es? Ah, ok. Menos mal.
No, para tú decir nada, mano, yo cero con eso.
No, bien, bien.
¿Ah?
Bien, más bien.
No, yo con eso nada, mano, ya no me gusta, no me gusta. Ya estoy con el yo, ya sabes, uno más nunca. Te lo devuelvo un ratito, ¿viste, mano? Gracias, mano, me salta. A la patria, mano.
All right. So, so in a particular case, we already did that. So when we run this in star, we can see that. Let me close this. It's this one. Open up here. There you got it. Unlike this, yeah. So now, as you can see, here is this. Right, it's actually updating in real time, which is awesome. You know, anytime this change input, anytime the input change, you can see that reflected in real time, and I think that's beautiful. It shows you in the hue, it shows you in this brightness and opacity, it shows you in this as a way to check to pick is the most relevant one. Interesting. The spectrum. Okay, the spectrum of color. This color is called. Oh, and they actually now have, and also as pencils. That's nice. Maraschino, tangerine, salmon, cajun, mocha, asparagus, fern, clover, moss, teal, ocean, midnight, eggplant, plum, maroon, strawberries. Is this a strawberry? Okay. Magenta, grape, blueberry, lavender, bubblegum. That's interesting. I think this is something. But is this from the browser? I don't think so. Oh, this is more. Is this from the browser? Oh yeah, that's something that is. Mozilla does. Okay, Mozilla doesn't have. Mozilla have a lot of that. That's what I'm gonna say. Mozilla have a lot of time. Mozilla have a lot of time, bro. Mozilla have a. Mozilla have a lot of time, bro. This is a Mozilla implementation. Oh, okay. Oh my god, Mozilla have a lot of time to compute. Anyway, but is that okay? Okay, good.
Guess not green.
It's definitely not my favorite color. Joke gone poorly.
Yeah, no, I didn't say it was like, yeah, dilute that was your favorite color. We know why you chose it. I'll leave that as an exercise to the reader. But we have that kind of in place. So we've got that wired up. Before I showed you how passing that set state was a little bit of a pain, I told you like, oh, if you use dispatch, it's a little bit easier. Let's actually see what that looks like. So if we want to like pass it in, we got to do a little bit of prop drilling. So we got to pass it from application to adjust colors, and from adjust color to that RGB inputs, right? And part of the reason that we're going to go through that extra layer of indirection is so I have an excuse to use the context API later. But we'll go through it. And so we also have to adjust some of the different props along the way. So your choice on how you want to refactor. You can refactor from that RGB input on up, or you can refactor from the application on down. The good news is that the like happy union of React and TypeScript is going to help you along the way. So I'm going to say that we're going to pass in dispatch. We'll say dispatch. Great. Cool. And so now we'll pass this through, and we'll say, we'll go into this one. And we'll say that we want to add the fact that it will take dispatch. And
add dispatch.
We can pull it in from React. Now, it does expect like what kind of action, right?
Exactly.
So one of the things I can do here is I will probably, very similar to what you saw me do right here, like I need this type. I do not want to type it over and over and over again, right? So what I'm going to do is say, just store it in this type here, and we'll swap it in here, and we'll go back.
Exactly. Dispatch action.
If you don't export things, you can't use them. Someone asked before, like, when do I make the decision on whether or not to put something in that definition file or import it all over the place? You know, if I was thinking if this app grew anymore, and like the idea that like I'm probably going to need something like this for select color. I'm probably going to need this somewhere else as well. I will show you a trick where I won't need it later. But for now, you can assume that if you're going to go down this path, you'd be importing this all over the place for a very common thing, right? So what I could do in this case, and I'll just show you because it can be done, is I can go into like any d.ts. I can paste this in here. And you'll notice that it is now like available in basically any file. So now I can go into this file over here, just to show you. I didn't have to import it anymore. It's just available, right? And in fact, if you wanted to, you could actually even like pull in the full React.dispatch and have like, you can abstract this as much as you want. Cool, so we have that in place. And then finally, we're going to go into hex to RGB. And there's two things that I could do here, and I'll show you, is I could say that it's copy and paste got a little carried away there, but that's cool. I got the import in for free anyway. Sweet. Save some files.
Actions, bro.
What's up?
Actions.
Oh, yep. What did I leave in that other file for myself? Just colors. Yeah, I made a mistake over here. Oh, no, it wants this. Just color actions.
It's because you're not using it as a dispatch, bro.
We'll pass it in as a prop here as well. Cool. As you can see, like my red is turning various shades.
It's because it's not just the component, bro.
Interesting, it doesn't have this one. Got React in here. Oh, I don't know, maybe I mistyped it. Cool, and so like, other than me not using it here, right, I can pull this all in. And I need to do a little work because these are 3 different values in here. So I've got, as you can see, some values here as well. And so what I'll do is just say, let's give ourselves a helper function. Red will be R, G will be green, oh, green will be G. And then this is just going to take these 3 values, I'm going to turn it into an array and send it off. And so what we'll do here is we'll say dispatch. And we'll say the type.
The type.
Oh, we got to take a look at that in a second. Let me take a look. Maybe my ad hoc moving that out into a different file is not my best choice, but we'll find out in a second. Oh, these weren't available in that other file because these are not exported.
Oh,
all right, so my whole thing of like, let me drop into that file as a
okay.
surreptitious like bonus thing that I was going to do is totally, we can take a look at that, but like maybe not while I'm in the middle of another thought. Cool.
Okay, I get it.
I guess I could move them all in and that would solve for that, but like while I give you something to do, then I will go move the file and verify it works and like midway through trying to make a point. Cool, so now everything makes sense a little bit more. So I should be able to go into application. If I look at this, dispatch is now what I think it is. It gets passed through, it goes to index. It's like, yo, I don't know what this is. That makes sense. So let's pull it in. Nope.
I didn't think you exported it.
Did I not export that one while I was talking? This is why we don't wing it.
Exactly.
There we go. All right, so now we're exporting everything. Now I should get, all right. And we go through. What you angry about?
It's because of dispatch here.
Figure it out in a second. Let's get everything else wired up.
Dispatch.
Cool. Now, yeah, now I know things are working. Right? Again, like, sure, was that my finest moment? No. Did I have to like go and flail wildly in the browser to see things didn't work? I just saw that like, hey, I'm not getting autocomplete. That's a signal that I have probably like flew too close to the sun while live coding, right? Like, so here we can say that the payload. And what's nice, if I hover over, I can be reminded about what format this looks like. So I can actually say, and that wants it in an RGB object, which I remember. But what's nice is that like should be an RGB. Number's not assignable to that, to either one of these two. Cool. And now, because I have no red squigglies, I can at least figure out that mostly everything's OK in here. Let's go back up and see what our problem is. The same problem that I had before, which is one bad naming decision. You know what? I'll just grab the other one. If you misspell things, your code doesn't compile. So now I've got no red squigglies, which gives me some confidence that I can go to my browser and see, right? Again, like the nice part is I am in the zone. I am looking at my code. I am seeing the errors immediately, and I can kind of address them. Versus, I want to tell you how it sometimes goes. And then we got to say on change in here.
This is X to RGB exactly.
So if you don't put on change handlers, nothing happens. So on change.
I want you to dispatch.
We'll take the event. And this time we can actually use, it's a number again. Great. But this time we actually want it to be a string. So like for the thing that I was complaining about the whole time, that value as number saved us from, we want that this time. No, we actually want it to be a number, so that's not true. We'll say, cool, we'll say update. I could dispatch the action from here too, but I made that helper up there. Update RGB, and here we'll say event.target.value, E. You make one coding mistake in front of your friends. Next thing you're embarrassed. Value is number, and that's actually got to be the, let's look at the error. Like, I know what it is, but it's like, yo, you're saying this red is number undefined, green number undefined, or blue. So we'll actually say red will be that target value. Blue will be B. Green will be G. And we can grab this and just adjust it slightly. Oh, we turn them all the same. That's not fun.
But not for the red, but in this case for the blue, in this case for the green.
There's probably a better utility function I could write for that, but that'll do the trick for now. my issue is.
Invalid color string. Oh, it's because the way how now
green,
this
blue.
is being formatted.
Correctly, invalid colors. Give me 1 second, I'll try.
It's because the way how this is being.
Wanna play a game? So I made this like slight meta point earlier of like, I bet we can make that hex color type better, right? And this is like a later chapter in this like workshop, but let's talk about it now because I got bitten by it. So we start out with hashtag BADA55. That's cool. Like we see it twice because like React 18 has concurrent rendering, so console logs show up twice in a render. It's not actually rendering twice. It's under hood React stuff. You'll see it once coming from the VM, once coming from application TXX. On the next render, one of these things is not like the other, which is this one starts with a hashtag, and this one starts with a string. I mean, this one starts without a hash. It's just a string. And when I say that hex color is, in this case, a string, Typescript's like, yo, I did my job here, right? And like, that is definitely, it's doing its job. That doesn't stop me from forgetting that the library that I'm using expects, when it takes the hex code, the library is expecting all hex codes to start with a hash, not my code. I forgot that. Thereby, the code crashed. So the fix, the really like illustrious fix is, watch this. No, get too show-offy with the pound sign, and you'll make a new mistake. Great. So yeah, I guess there is a cautionary tale here that TypeScript will solve like from 90% of the bugs, but not all of them.
Yeah, but the whole point of this is that because you were updating this now, the particular component, which is back then is this one, and it's this one, okay? Exactly, and is in our case we want to define the color action. We want is to, as we now type here, we want is to of course update the RGB here. Let's take a look now at the component application, and the application here where we are now is say, okay, let's go to adjust the color, but this time is from the X color, but this time is from the RGB color. You know, as we can see here. So we need to actually pass this down data to the adjust color, to the to the X2 RGB, okay, to deep down into that component that actually care about that value, that input. The reason of doing this is just as a way to see how you can now is by using Typescript, how you can pass down your dispatch functions, trigger that function down there, and then update that. Here when you define your update RGB, okay, so this will be called is whenever the component is getting rendered. As you can see here. So let's get into this. So first is the application that we want us to actually send this dispatch down there to the dispatch. Here is of course complaining because we say, hey, type, let me actually follow me along here. It's actually saying, hey, type dispatch color actions here, okay? As you can see here, dispatch color actions, hex color string is not assignable to intrinsic attribute and adjust color props. So property dispatch does not exist on type intrinsic and adjust color props. So if we down deep to this, it say, hey, adjust color props doesn't have that particular property. So no problem, because here we can actually add that. As you can see here, we're using is type in our React component. So let's go to dispatch this and say add dispatch. So what you to use is the built-in function type from React, and the type of the actions that we can use of this. Right, in this case is because most of the time we want is to make use of this types. We need to export that, okay, or we can just export that in a global function definitions. But with this is like this. So we can say, hey, I just want is the call action. Let me call here is now the call action here, name of that, and then we use that. Adjust color action at last. You say adjust color actions. That's right. There you got it. Exactly. It say, hey, who the f is this? Well, please correct this error. And in our application here, specifically in adjust color, we say, hey, we want is to dispatch that for the adjust color action that comes from that read author, right? So slowly but progressive, things started to make a lot of sense. As you can see here, dispatch internally is a generic function, which is a generic type, which means that it's like a factory but for types. So pretty much like functions are factory for values, generic are types are factory for types. And in this case, it says that whatever value you're gonna receive here, it'll be of this shape, of this type, and we're not going to return anything. So this is a good example of starting to see the connections of all of these concepts as we move on. Of course, we need to actually pass is the dispatch here, okay, and since we are in the React world, we want to pass down that dispatch to this, down to the X color here, okay, X to RGB, say who the F, I don't know what is that, okay, actually save this, it say, hey, X to RGB is actually pretty descriptive, you can even read this or read here, okay. So type dispatch adjust color, hex color string is not assignable to type intrinsic and hex to RGB property. Property type does not exist on type intrinsic attributes and hex to RGB props. So it means that is now has this intrinsic attribute, okay, which is something that if you take a look now at this intrinsic attribute, now for this, let's say as a type here, you say, hey, what is this intrinsic attributes that you mentioned here? Intrinsic attributes. Okay. Is this come from React? You might wonder. Intrinsic. Interesting. Intrinsic attributes. It's part of the intrinsic attributes. But as you can see, is that this intrinsic attributes and X to RGB, followed by the intrinsic attributes. So that's something quite interesting. If you put here intrinsic you put here intrinsic attribute, it actually doesn't have anything. Intrinsic. That's interesting. All right. It seems that this is something that is particular to GSX, right? Like that intrinsic value. As you can see here, additionally, the GSX intrinsic elements or intrinsic attributes. This is the type of this, the GSX. It exports an interface called intrinsic attributes, but it has that. This is from the GSX. All right. So the GSX has now is that particular thing. The idea here is to develop this aware of what's going on, and since in a particular case we need to patch is the dispatch function, which is coming from React dispatch, and since this is a generic function, the type function, here we're gonna now pass is the shape of this action that we can perform, which is in this case is action color action, adjust color actions from the reducer. We receive this, okay, as a props here. We now dispatch this here. So the whole point of this is to create now a function called is update RGB, okay, where now you're gonna receive is this as an attribute is the red. Okay, so the red and as R, the green. He made that because this is very not specific to that. Because after all, he wants to dispatch that. We're going to receive is this red as R, the blue as the blue state that we're receiving, as well as the green, light green. Okay, and well, anytime we call this function update RGB or handle RGB, we want is to now call this dispatch and now pass these objects with the type of holy moly, God bless you, America. Update the RGB color, followed by the payload. All right, and the payload here, not quite sure what is the payload. It must be RGB. Okay. That I don't know why it doesn't complete. Help me here with the auto completion. Okay, where this receive now is this the R, the V, and the G. Or red, blue, and green. But the idea here is to make that as a way to initialize them with this particular value that we're getting from the color, right? Exactly. So anytime that this change on change, we want now is to get that Okay. We want now is to get that. Update RGB color here. Okay. And well, here we want is now to call is the update RGB. Pass is the proper value there, like so. And you say red, since this represents the value red. We want now is to pass is the event. Event target dot value, put value as number. Interesting, very interesting. And we can pretty much do the same for the other one, which is when this change on change, we are now listening to the event, particularly on the input HTML element, and I want to actually make that quick overview to that, and especially by looking at the methods here. As well as the CSS, enable read-only check valid required blank. Attribute selector. Pattern, placeholders, appearance, caret. Field sizing, accessibility, technical summary, it doesn't mention anything related to month. This is attributes. But it doesn't mention anything related to the events. And you might wonder, why do you want to check out that? I think this is quite important as a way to recap that, especially to understand where this come from. Especially for the, this is the input types, the attributes that come from the HTML elements interface. And the event target. Oh, HTML implement. There you got it. HTML element, event. But this is for any HTML elements, as you can see here. Similar to the instance method here, HTML blur, click focus, and their properties. In animation events as well. And the event target. So, as a way to simplify a little bit our story here, this is something that comes from the HTML input, like HTML here, as you can see. Right, on change, hey, I want you to now detect me that and provide this, the latest value that we're getting here. So far so good. That's what we have now. This on change. This label input, actually, I'm assuming that it's exporting is on change. Exactly. That's great. So basically we're gonna do is the same here. We're gonna say, hey, now since this is the event here that we're reading from this event in, because after all, we want is to now dispatch this action. Okay, but this action is the update RGB. The update RGB. Okay, we want is to now update is the object. So now red is error. Now blue is the event target dot value as number, similar to the red here, red blue green, but in this case is, I mean, it's green, sorry, otherwise we will be overriding that. Is green, and pretty much the same now for green label here, right? So we want is to actually is now is on change now trigger this function. Okay, so on change, I want you to trigger this function that will now call this handler, aka update RGB, by passing is this object as the red, that'll be red with the shape of red, blue with B, and green as the current value of that event at that moment, which is the value as numbers. All right, so this in theory is supposed to work. All right, and as you can see, it's actually now crashing the app. And why is this crashing the app? Well, because the way how now is being passed through that is that, hey, this is invalid color at this line. It's a, hey, HSL is invalid color at that line. It means that the simpler color that we're passing that data is not as expected. The question is that who actually is sending that? Rotation try, get tricolor related to React 19 here. Rotation map try and it tells us that it's not pretty descriptive about the error, but it tells us the way the above error occurring the related color components. So thanks for that. So when we take a look now the related component, here, where here we are now say and the related colors, and because now it's calling is this as a way to update that. All right, related color parallel, so you are receiving as a next color and it must be a string for that. But the TLDR of all of this is that since this is being used in the component here and on the index on the related color here, so the problem was on how it was generate that color as it is, right? Because anytime you are need to generate is a new color or a new state or new data, well, you need to actually is in this case RGBX, or in this case action.payload is actually passed now the hash for that as a way to generate that XML color. So you can see it actually is doing as expected. So Typescript will help you 19% of your errors. Exactly. React will help you with 90% of your errors. So you gotta be careful with that. You gotta be careful with that. Exactly. This is passing this pass as props. Verify that your reducer is updating the state properly. Color formats. Use X color. Okay. Okay. All right. Interesting. Interesting. This is now template literals. Template literal types. Exactly. Template literal types. So this tangent here was a way to see how you can actually create this as a way to prevent this kind of errors, right? You can define as a type called xcolor, but like this, where now this will be is now of this type. Okay, this is the value type. That is, start with this, and then you can define it as, but as a string. So this is a valid type. However, if you want to use this, all right. So for example, you have now types here, RGB string, or color formats, right? Or color formats. When you can have several of them, we can be RGB. This is when you have several types here. RGB, X, RGB, X, HSL, XCC, HSV. All right. And then if you want to compose that for composition, you say actions or color actions. So color actions. You can totally do this and say, hey, if this is string that I'm going to receive, it can be either one of those type, update, color format, color, update, color format, update color format, color. And now it will actually autocomplete that for me. It's a color actions of the X, RGB, SSL, and SSV. Because after all, remember that the type level, the type level you are generating is all of this type for that, which is so far so good, right? Which is so far so good. You can also use in things like this, type RGB, using template string as a way to say RGB is a number followed by a number, another number, another number. All right. So this is also actually something valid here. You can generate types, or you can generate types, you can generate template literal types like this, and I want to know is the use case. So the use case for this so the use case for this this is another example hitting XX color. as a way to verify that. So is xcolor, or is a particular format here that you're receiving this as a string, and since this is a boolean, but you want it to return out this string that start with this. So hey, if you guarantee me that, I can say that the output of this, okay, will be is hex color. But it say, hey, I expect you to pass me this thing here. So now this X color, it say, hey, the S must be an string like this. So now this is the output of this. So is X color, you're now returning is a string from that. So the use case for this, which is after all what I really care about this. So when getting JSON in our API, No problem. I'm working. I'm working on that. The dispatch of the type. What is this? Call action. From the React. Dispatch. And then here, when it comes to save the call, do the save color. The color search, exactly. Color change. Which is payload, X color, famous last word. Famous last word. Famous last word, man. Famous last word. Famous last word, man. This is working. I shouldn't have any of the issues. Famous last word. Famous last word. Las famosas últimas palabras. Cálmate. Nunca he calmado a nadie. Because of this. Mm-hmm. Is an object. It's inherit that. Is after you need to export the color provider. Mm-hmm. You pass now the children and also the values. You need to define that inside of that. In my case, actually happens. I do that this kind of error so often that it's like, I know what happened. Exactly. So what is the default value here? We just said. Mm-hmm. No, we shouldn't use that like that for small app level data. For small. Okay. So create context now is creating is a genetics. It accepts now this factory of types. But this patch can only live inside of the React component. Mm. Well, you can mock that dispatch function. The other is using a function. Okay. Pretending it is. Wait a single moment. Why you knock the wood, man? Why you knock the table? Perplexity. Of worry, of bad luck. Oh my god. Pagan tradition. To the cross of Jesus, thereby giving it more acceptable religious connotation. The religions always wants to control the network, but it's okay. But it's from pagan tradition. Knocking on wood, bro. Holy fuck. Knocking on wood, also phrased as touching wood, or touch wood, is a apotropic tradition of literally touching, tapping, or knocking on wood, or merely staying the one is doing or intending to do so in order to avoid tempting fate. After making a favorable prediction or boost or declaration concerning one's own death or another unfavorable situation. From the Celtic motherfuckers. Medieval apotropic marking of the inside of the church in Suffolk in England. apotropaic magic. Efecto apotropaico. Knocking on wood, bro. Anyway. Exactly. Use that. Use this particular context here. Color provider. But the color provider. Yeah, but what you did exactly was to now define is the state inside of that, and that's all. And then you pass dispatch to all of that. gonna use this color context from the so I can have access to the value that has been priced. Oh, totally, I feel you. Because it's inside of that. This is interesting that he is using is Edge, bro. It's very, very interesting, bro. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Did you provide that? Yeah, bundling everything nicely and then put it there. Bundling everything nicely. Mm-hmm. Or initial state. Mm-hmm. Make a type on the fly dynamically. Oh, yeah.
Entonces, ¿le tiene miedo a los perros? Ella le tiene miedo a los perros.
Key off. This is a way of how you can tell, hey, type of status as a number. Mm. Pull type of the values, bro. Hey, we need to pull type of the values, type of status number. Because what it do is just pull status of values here, and because this is an array, what is the type? What is the type of this? No. On the update. Yeah, I know what it is, which is and mm, mm. Mm-hmm. As a way to dictionary. Partial. Without the ID, omit is from this type. Exactly. It putting all of this like that, so it generates this. It generates this factory. Okay. So using this special type or this utility the Typescript, this utility Typescript as a way to now do something when you need to. So for example, most of the time it's partial as a way to put all of the property names as optionals and then omit a particular one. Mm. Well, that'll be all for this video. Take care. Bye bye.